Welcome back to the Purple Chairs in the middle of Dublin City, and today we have a familiar face, but a great face to have with us. It's Mr. Dave Humphreys.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Yeah. Just back in the door literally from Auto Shanghai 2023, and Dave has the inside scoop of what's going on and coming to us. So Dave,
yeah,
take it on.
Yeah, fascinating
Mind
show.
blow.
Yeah, it's just we kind of thought that motor shows were dead in Europe, but absolutely not the case over in Shanghai and in China. Obviously, world's biggest EV market, and naturally EVs were front and center there. But it's kind of difficult to get your head around when you're only looking at the European car market of just how big, how enormous, how diverse it is in China, and really also how quickly they are changing, how quickly they're moving forward with EVs and with battery technology, with different brands we've never heard of, but brands that we're going to start hearing about because they have their eyes set on Europe, and a number of brands are now going to look to come into Europe. I think they're going to shake things up.
But so you're saying about motor shows, I remember I was in Frankfurt in 19, I can't remember, but Ferrari didn't go that year. And like that was the start. It was kind of was it pre-COVID or kind of before?
Would have been pre-COVID, yeah. Kind of COVID
why?
stopped with the Geneva Motor Show in 2020, and that was kind of cancelled literally a couple of days before when the whole pandemic was starting.
Yeah. So
but motor shows had started to wind down because they'd all gotten a bit too big, a bit too expensive to attend. And I think a lot of the legacy brands, the European brands, were looking at it kind of going, we're not getting great value for money here. But then we didn't have them for a few years.
Why did they see it as a big thing?
It's just such a big car market. But what's interesting about being at Auto Shanghai was that the European brands, the BMWs, the Porsches, they didn't have the biggest stands there. They were kind of a lot more modest because although they do big numbers there, it's totally eclipsed by what the local brands, if you want to call them, are doing. And you've got huge operations there now from these brands. You've got BYD, you've got NIO, you've got so many different big conglomerate groups there that have brands that you've never heard of here, and some brands that you'll never hear of. But they are rolling out models to beat the band over there because the market there is so hungry for new products, for new things, for new brands, new designs. So they have to keep track with all that as well.
So because I have this vision in 5 or 10 years' time when you'll be looking out the window and you just won't know who's making what. And they'll all do the same pretty much. So,
I
the
think
snobbery thing will go down.
Absolutely. A couple of years ago, 4, 5, 6 years ago, if you had considered to European buyers, it's the new car brand from China, they would have turned their nose up at it.
Yeah, completely.
But I think now with the shift towards electrification and everything that's happening there, people are realizing now, to a certain extent, an electric car is an electric car is an electric car. They all have this kind of platform, this kind of skateboard style design, and then your body goes on top. And I think also there's less of a kind of snobbery around anything that's made in China now. Your iPhone is made in China.
Everything.
Your TV probably is, your computer. And the cars are no different. Now, when I started covering the China market a number of years ago, what they are producing was definitely nowhere near the sort of, I wouldn't say standards, but the expectations of European buyers. But that has rapidly changed because the Chinese car brands iterate so much more quickly than the European brands do. And they realize, we'll make mistakes, but we'll rectify them and we'll move forward. And they do it far, far quicker than the sort of legacy brands that we know of here in Europe. And I think that's why they're getting so much more success now, because they're moving so much more quickly and they're not scared to make mistakes, and they'll just, if a model isn't working, they'll kill it and move on to something better.
So remember you were saying about the R&D centre, which was built in a year and a half? To
get an idea of how they operate.
Because it's mind-blowing scale though, isn't it?
It is,
You can't. There's no point trying to get your head around.
I mean, to give you an idea of just how big the car market is in China, one of the last times I was there, I was there with Volkswagen, and Volkswagen have long been the #1 brand in China. They've actually just been eclipsed by BYD. But at the time, I was trying to compare it, to Ireland, to China, that kind of thing. Now, Ireland, admittedly, is a small car market, but every Volkswagen vehicle sold in Ireland in 12 months. In China, they sold in 40 hours. To give you an idea of just how big that market is, it's enormous, So you have multiple brands selling millions of units per year there. So it's just kind of hard to get your head around. But you got to remember, this is a country with more than 1 billion people in it. So it is just phenomenal. Shanghai has just Shanghai alone has 24 million people in it. Beijing has 20 million people, just 2 cities.
Yeah, it's insane.
And there's dozens of other cities that have that kind of thing. But one of those cities was a small, kind of what they call a tier 3 city, Baoding, 10 million people. I went to Great Wall Motors have a hydrogen R&D centre and production site there, and 1.2 million square meters. They built it in 14 months from a greenfield site to fully operational, up and running, 14 months, and that gives you a kind of an idea of how quickly they're moving with these things. When they make a decision, it happens, and it all moves very, very quickly from that moment.
Yeah, so it's not, red tape and months of listen, we can't use that place. It's just done, and that's it.
It just happens, and that's it. And also, when they want to create a new model, they'll create a new model, and it happens. A European brand might spend 8 years from concept to developing the car to doing it. These guys are doing it in 18 months.
So why is Europe so attractive to them?
Because
if they have a massive scale themselves.
Because they see room for expansion.
Okay.
And there's a lot of the brands that in China are kind of reaching saturation point. They're kind of reaching their, okay, this is pretty much all we're going to be able to sell. But they don't want to just settle at that. They just want to keep going, keep expanding. And obviously with Europe moving so much towards full electrification now, they see that they have the expertise when it comes to battery technology. They are really, really advanced with this. It's not just, don't think that Chinese brands are just cheap electric cars. Like, they're developing much more advanced battery technology, much more advanced electric motors. So it's not just that they're cheaper. They are actually cheaper, and in some cases a lot better.
And the main European brands are using their battery technology anyway.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, like there's a lot of collaboration with these companies already. So it's nothing new. Perhaps it is to the public, but within the industry, it's something that's been going on for a long time. And they have the models, they have the desire to grow, and they're going in. They're not going to suddenly come to Europe and just obliterate everybody, but they're going to eat a lot of people's lunches.
Yeah. And so in all the show, then so BYD are obviously just landed here now. Yeah,
so BYD, Build Your Dreams, they've just launched in Ireland, and they're doing a partnership with MDL here, who were the distributors for Mercedes-Benz in Ireland. And MDL, that gives you a bit of an idea of how this is going, because MDL have been around since the 50s. They're an extremely experienced company when it comes to doing this kind of thing. They brought so many brands to Ireland: Volkswagen, Mazda, all this kind of stuff. So they know what they're at. For those guys to take on BYD shows how seriously
and how long of a game it is, and all the stuff coming through.
Absolutely. But they even, when I spoke to Kieran Allen, his head of sales there, he was sort of explaining to me that, they started this 2 years ago, the initial discussions, but really it ramped up in, within 4 weeks was when it was really all pen to paper and done. And they've got cars coming here. They've probably got a couple of hundred cars on the ground here. They've already got 3 dealers. They're going to expand that again. These guys are doing it properly, and they're going to have 3 models. They're going to have the Auto 3, the Seal, the Dolphin. They've got more models coming as well. The Seagull, which is a small budget EV, like a city car. And I realise, these kind of names, they sound a bit silly.
Yeah, it's this David Attenborough stuff.
Yeah, I mean, this is the thing. In China, they have a different naming strategy, different way of doing things. You've got other brands like Aura that have this car called the Funky Cat.
But is that just to get attention and then they change them?
It's how they do it in China. Okay. And over in China, it's different. But in Europe, like we have names for certain things, but we're also moving more towards just having this kind of nomenclature that's based on numbers and that kind of stuff. But at the same time, you can end up, how do you strike a balance? Do you call your car a funky cat because it gets attention, it gets people talking about it, it's very easy to remember? Or do you just give it a name that's letters and numbers and it sounds like a fax machine? Yeah. It's a bit like that. It's hard to do. Admittedly, when I was talking to them, BYD said, well, maybe Seagull, we might change that name given the seagull population in Dublin. It might not go down that well because they're kind of seen as pests here. But over, in markets like China, they don't think about that. That's just not. It's not
produce.
Yeah, well, it's just the name is kind of irrelevant. Is the car, is it good? Does it look good? Does it meet what I need? And what crucially was a price?
But like that BYD coming in, which is what
Auto 3, yeah.
So that's going to be 37 grand ish.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
39 grand.
Starting at 37 at the moment. Obviously, the grants for all the electric vehicles are changing a little later in the year, so everything will go up a little bit.
But which can only be comparable to an MG4 price wise.
Absolutely, yeah.
And it's a serious car for that money.
Yeah, yeah.
This is where the brand. Look what I'm driving. That fades away as you're thinking, well, it's 39 grand for a serious car.
Yeah, I think buyers in Ireland are still a little bit conservative, and they still get a little bit hung up on the brand and brand image and what's on the front of the car. But I think that attitude needs to change, because there's a lot of great cars coming here that are going to come here that are from brands you've never heard of. Now, the flip side is, if it's a brand you never heard of, it means there's no legacy. You got to remember, 20 years ago, Skoda was the car that you made a joke about, and now it's one of the most desirable brands around in the mainstream. So that will change, and I think with electrification, people look at, well, does it have things like, does it have the range I need? Is it in the price I need? Do I like the look of it? The badge is kind of secondary to that, And okay, it's funny, like you look at the Auto 3, and on the back of the BYD, it does say "Build Your Dreams." Like the badging is on the back.
Does it?
And people said to me, when I put it on Twitter and stuff, I was showing it to people, and people thought, I like the car, but I don't like I don't like the fact it says "Build Your Dreams" on the back. It's like, but you can just take that badge off. Like, don't let that deter you, And I imagine maybe a lot of people will do it, but. I spent a week over in China around the show. Nobody does it over there. It's not a thing over there.
It's not a thing.
They just don't get caught up with that kind of thing.
Because people go critically straight into being critical about something before they start going, actually, this is all right.
Yeah, and look, you've got to drive these things. You've got to go and experience them, because I genuinely think people will maybe be surprised by it, And look, they're not perfect, and there are certain things that, in China, the priorities are different. What people want from a car is different. They want, they want features inside the car. They want, like, the infotainment system from some brands is much stronger. The connectivity, all that kind of stuff, rather than maybe how it drives. But there were some interesting things when I drove the Auto 3 here in Ireland at the start of this week. One of the first things you noticed was that they had it on good tires. They're all on Continental tires, and whereas you drive some other stuff and they'll just have it on very cheap budget tires. Things like that
makes a difference.
But to me, it shows how seriously they're taking it, because that's a small little thing, but they realise no, we need to do things right. And so
it's a long
having
game.
Their cars on good,
it's definitely long.
Tires.
And what else then excites you brand-wise, new brands that we would never have heard of?
There's a lot. The one thing when you spend time looking at everything they had at Auto Shanghai was just how there are so many brands you've never heard of. They are all eyeing Europe. So Zeekr, which is a subsidiary of the GD Group, which obviously owns Volvo, LEVC, Polestar, Lotus.
Everything really.
They own, they're a huge player in the industry now. Zeekr is one of their latest brands that they've created. And you've got to remember, these groups, these conglomerates, they will create a brand overnight. And suddenly it has 2, 3, 4 models. So they're going to come to Europe with the 001 and the Zeekr X initially. They've already got a design center in Amsterdam. and they will start to sell their cars here. There's a number of other brands we're already seeing in some markets in Europe. So you've got NIO, which is again one of the big players in the Chinese market. They are coming into Europe. They will probably expand over the next 12 to 36 months into probably nearly every country in Europe. They already have battery swapping stations in Norway. So one of NIO's USPs is that rather than charging the car, which you can do, is you can drive into a battery swapping center. It's a bit like it, which is what actually Tesla originally wanted to do, and they never really managed to get it off the ground. And what you do is you drive into effectively like a kind of like a car wash, as it were. You drive in, your car lifts up, it literally drops out the battery, slides it out, slides in the new battery, takes 3 minutes, and you're fully charged again. So that's another way that it completely gets around the whole charging infrastructure thing. Now, admittedly, that means it requires huge investment because you're buying in a way like when Tesla created the supercharging network. You've got all this financial outlay to create this infrastructure for one brand. It's not going to suit everybody, but it's an option. Hongqi is another brand, very premium, very luxury. They are.
Was Hongqi the one? Did they have a sports car and then that? Was that the one I was talking about earlier?
Hongqi.
They have this big, massive SUV as well.
They have a big SUV that's a bit like a Rolls-Royce Cullinan, big, huge, bold grille. They're in some of the Scandinavian countries at the moment now. They're looking at expanding. GWM Aura, who I mentioned already, they've got the Funky Cat, which is on sale here now. It is a little bit expensive. It's a little bit too expensive, really. They're going to have another model, which is the Lightning Cat at the moment, is what it's called.
Crossover.
But that's going to be like a saloon. It is the car that everybody says looks like a mix between a Porsche Panamera and a Bentley. But that will be the next model that they bring here. So
that'd be expensive, though, won't it?
Yeah, I mean, that could be 60,000, 70,000 euros. We don't have pricing for that yet. And they will also develop another car, which will be a mid-size SUV, and that will be initially their 3. But within that GWM, Great Wall Motors, they're probably the second biggest private company, non-state-owned enterprise in China. They also have a number of other brands. They've got Wei, which is, I think you've mentioned, you've seen in Frankfurt. So they have a number of different models already. They have the Wei Coffee and things like that, primarily SUV based. They've also got Habal, which is another SUV brand, a bit more utilitarian. They're in some markets like Italy at the moment, so they're kind of putting their toe in the water of a number of European brands. They're also got a bigger SUV brand called Tank, which has stuff like, would be more akin to a mixture of like a Toyota Land Cruiser, which is the Tank 500. They've got some smaller models that are like Jeep Wranglers. They're also looking at coming, again, this is all from the one group, they're also looking at coming to Europe, although they kind of have a struggle around the name Tank and the kind of negative from it's not really a great thing to have an SUV brand that's called Tank. So they may rebrand, but also that's not a big thing for them. They're perfectly happy to just go, we'll just come up with a different name and put a different badge on it and sell it there. So,
but is it a case, though, that it'll be very few companies owning everything?
It is going that way, absolutely. But we already have this. You've got General Motors in the United States. You've got big groups. You look at Volkswagen Group and all of the brands that it has. You look at Stellantis, 15 strong brands. It's kind of the same in China. You've got, as I mentioned, you've got Geely, which is, you've got Volvo, Polestar, Lotus, LEVC, Zeekr.
They all look the same, the cars, though.
They do, to a certain degree, because that's the economies of scale that these brands have. You look at, Stellantis, for example, they have this, their platform that underpins dozens of cars. But also Volkswagen did it with MQB. The Volkswagen Golf was the Seat Cupra, was the dozens of cars.
Just like different dresses, really.
That's how they do it. And with electrification, it is going that way. You do just have all of these different kind of things. You have different kind of brands where you've got effectively a skateboard. It's the same thing. You want your 2 wheels, you want your battery, and that's it. So.
Wow. And what about in the really high-end luxury section then?
Yeah, the luxury stuff.
Still waiting for Lucid.
Yeah, I mean, look, Lucid are concentrating on the States. they're concentrating on a number of other different markets. Yeah, they will come to Europe. I don't know how quickly they'll come to Europe, but as in how quickly they'll start to roll out stuff. Right-hand drive market is not something that is a priority for them at the moment. Yeah, it's just too small. But look, give it time, and they can come here. But I think Lucid is just one brand, and also it's not part of anything else. It's same with Rivian, same with all these other companies as well. So it won't always happen that quickly.
They weren't at that, were they?
Rivian weren't there, no.
Were Lucid?
Lucid weren't there either, no. So look, for a lot of brands, there's a lot of Chinese brands want to come to Europe. It's much easier for them to come this way than to go into China. And already there are some other brands that are going to leave the Chinese market because they can't compete anymore. Skoda were there. They're slowly making their way to leave that market, but they're going to now move into Asia, into Vietnam, places like that.
But there's no Chinese company or brand coming over here just with one car. They're coming out here with a plethora of cars.
Yeah, I think initially they'll come at one. Yeah, I mean, as I mentioned, or here at the Funky Cat, but they'll very quickly follow that up with multiple brands.
Yeah.
With multiple models.
Yeah.
Same with MG came here with the ZS, but then they had the HS, the MG4 as well now, and they've got more. They've got MG have unveiled the Cyberster, which is a new roadster that they're going to have fully electric, a bit like a kind of.
I thought that was a joke against.
No, they really are. That's happening as well. And yeah. So again, these are more and more brands coming, and I think that's the big thing really to take away from Auto Shanghai. Was just there's a lot happening, there's a lot more to come, and I think definitely need to watch this space.
But so the motor show in China is still going to be a thing into the future?
I think so, yeah. Auto Shanghai it's a huge show. They probably have 1 million people there over a couple of days, but it's a great insight to see just what's coming down the line.
Can you bring me over next time?
Yeah, sure.
Brilliant. All right, so that's great, unbelievable information coming from Dave as always, and thanks for being here, Dave. It's always good to see you. So hopefully gave you a little bit of inside information about what's happening on the other side of the world. And until next time, subscribe and like. See you later.